In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to prove that hell was never real. We're going to look at every single word that the Bible uses, Sheol, Hades, and Gehenna. And I'm going to show you exactly how mistranslations and fear turned ancient words into eternal torture chambers that God never created. And by the end, you're going to understand why millions of people have been living in unnecessary fear of something that was never a threat. But before we dive in, let me ask you something personal. If you have children, or if you've ever loved anyone deeply, would you create a torture chamber for them? Would you burn them forever, for any reason? Of course not. You're made in God's image, and that love, that protection, that fierce care that you feel, where do you think that comes from? If you, an imperfect human, would never torture someone you love, or probably never even torture someone that you hate, what does that tell us about God? The one who treasures you more than you could ever imagine. So why do so many people believe that this God of love created hell? Well, let's find out. So last week we showed that the end times in Scripture weren't about the physical world being destroyed. They were about the end of the Old Covenant. We saw that judgment was poured out at the cross, not saved up for some future day. And it is finished really meant it is finished. So naturally, people ask, okay, Steve, well, what about hell? I mean, if judgment already happened at the cross and everyone was included in what Jesus accomplished, then what are all those verses about hell? Hey, that's a fair question, and today we're going to answer it. Now, before we dive into the Hebrew and Greek words, I need to acknowledge something. I know that this might feel scary to consider. Questioning something that you've believed your entire life, and I want you to know that this isn't about losing your faith. This is about discovering an even more beautiful truth about God's character. For many of us, the fear of hell wasn't just a belief, it was trauma. And if you're feeling very anxious right now, that's okay. Take a deep breath. You're completely safe. We've cried ourselves to sleep. We've worried about our loved ones. We've given up dreams and relationships and even our sanity trying to save people from a fire that never existed. I've talked to so many people who haven't spoken to family members in years because they couldn't handle the constant evangelizing. I've met parents who live in terror that their children might not make it. And I've counseled believers who are so traumatized by hell sermons that they can't even enjoy their own salvation. Now, if that's you, if you've carried that fear, if you've lost sleep over people that you love, well, this isn't just theology for you. This is personal. And you deserve to know the truth. Because what if I told you that the fear you've carried was based on words that never meant what you were told they meant? Let's find out. Now let me read to you a verse from the Old Testament. Psalms 9:17. Now this is the King James Version. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. That sounds terrifying, right? I mean, this verse has been used to scare people for centuries. But here's what you need to know. The word hell, right here, didn't exist when this was written. See, hell is an English word, and the Bible was written in Hebrew, at least the Old Testament. The actual Hebrew word used here is Sheol. Now let's look at the Strong's Hebrew Dictionary. That's the most trusted biblical concordance for over 100 years. So here it is. It defines Sheol as the world of the dead. But then Strong's goes on to show us how King James translators rendered this one Hebrew word into English. They used three words, grave, hell, and pit. One Hebrew word for three different English words. The word hell in the Old Testament appears 31 times in the King James Version, but the Hebrew word Sheol, it appears 65 times. See, 31 times it was translated to the word hell, but 32 times they translated it grave, and 2 times they translated it pit. So here's my question. How did the translators know when to translate Sheol into hell and when to translate it into grave or pit? Well, let me show you. In Genesis 37, verse 35, when Jacob thinks Joseph is dead, he says, I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Same word, Sheol, but right here it means grave. Now watch this. Let's go back to that scary Psalms 9, verse 17. Instead of the wicked shall be turned into hell, what if the word grave was used instead? The wicked shall be turned into the grave, and all the nations that forget God. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Everyone dies. Everyone goes to the grave. That's not eternal torture. That's just biology. And this lines up perfectly with what God told Adam and Eve. He said, you will surely die. He didn't say that you're going to burn forever. Just die. Death. The grave. Sheol. And that's it. In the Old Testament, there is not one single word that was translated into the word hell that means hell, because the only word ever translated into the word hell was Sheol. You can look it up. I'm not making any of this up. All right, let's move on to the New Testament. Now, when the Old Testament was translated into Greek, about 300 years before Jesus was born, the translators took the Hebrew word Sheol and translated it into the Greek word Hades. It's the same concept, the same meaning. It just means the world of the dead. See, here it is. It means the place of departed souls, the world of the dead. It's the same thing. Not torture, not eternal punishment, just the place of departed souls. Now, when Jesus spoke about Hades, he was using it the same way the Old Testament used Sheol. In Matthew 16, verse 18, Jesus was speaking and said, and I say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. That Greek word there was not hell, it was actually Hades. Now think about this. Jesus is talking about the gates of hell. Now, if Hades was a place of eternal torture, why would it have gates? Gates are for keeping people in or keeping people out. But if people are being eternally tortured, why would they need gates at all? They're not going anywhere. The gates make sense if Hades is just the world of the dead, a holding place that can be opened. And that's exactly what happened. When Jesus rose from the dead, he left Hades. He left the world of the dead, because Hades isn't hell. It's just the Greek word for Sheol, the world of the dead. Now we come to the big one, Gehenna. This is the word that has terrified people the most. In Matthew 23, verse 33, it says, Jesus was speaking to the religious leaders. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? That word hell is Gehenna, and it sounds terrifying, doesn't it? But here's what you need to know about Gehenna. Gehenna wasn't some mystical afterlife location. Gehenna was a real place. It was called the Valley of Hinnom, right outside of Jerusalem. The Strong's Greek Dictionary defines Gehenna as the Valley of Hinnom, a valley of Jerusalem. A valley of Jerusalem, not the afterlife. A literal valley outside the city. Now check out this image from Google Maps. This is modern-day Jerusalem, and right there in the middle, here's the Valley of Hinnom. It's still there. You can go visit it today. Now here's the history that you need to understand, because this valley had a horrific past. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 31. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it even come into my heart. Did you catch that? Burning people in that valley that Jesus was talking about. God said in the Old Testament that he did not command them to do that, nor did it even come into his heart to do that. God says that burning people in Gehenna never entered his mind. It was an abomination to him. Now just take a moment. I want you to pause this video for a moment. Think about someone that you love deeply. Maybe it's your child, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your best friend. Would you ever torture them for any reason, for any length of time? Of course not. You're made in God's image. That love, that protection you feel, that's just a reflection of how God feels about every person, including the people that you think don't deserve it. Now go ahead and press play whenever you're ready to continue. Hey, welcome back. Did you take a minute to reflect on that? I hope that you did. But now by Jesus' time, this valley had become the city dump. The garbage was burned down there. Dead animals were thrown in there. And yes, the bodies of criminals or those who couldn't afford the proper burial were discarded there. So when Jesus said Gehenna, his audience knew exactly what he meant. They could see it. They could smell the smoke from where they were. He wasn't threatening eternal torture. He was warning about ending up being discarded like garbage, cast out by society. In Matthew 5:22, Jesus says, "But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother shall be in danger of hellfire," Gehenna fire. Jesus isn't saying be angry and burn forever. He's saying that hatred and contempt will destroy your relationships and make you the kind of person that society discards. So here's the key question. It said that burning people in Gehenna never entered his mind. How could we possibly believe that God would use that very same thing as his eternal plan for punishment? Wouldn't that make God guilty of the very thing that he called abominable? See, Jesus wasn't threatening people with hell. He was warning them about the real-life consequences of the path they were on, the path that leads to being discarded by society. All right, so let's recap what we've discovered. Sheol is simply the world of the dead. It was always mistranslated as the word hell. And Hades, the Greek equivalent of Sheol, same thing. Every time it was a mistranslation. And Gehenna, that is a real valley outside Jerusalem, not an afterlife location. And Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, check out all his writings because he never mentioned hell one time. These are 3 different words, 3 different meanings, all forced into one English concept that never existed in the original languages. But here's the question, how did this happen? And more importantly, why did this happen? Because when you understand the how and the why, you'll see that this wasn't an accident. This was a choice. Let me tell you a story about the translation. See, around 1611, King James commissioned a New English Bible. The translators weren't just scholars. They were working under the authority of a king and a church that had very specific ideas about how to control people. And they had a problem. How do you translate 3 different words from 2 different languages that have 3 different meanings into one English concept? So here's what they did. They borrowed a word from Germanic mythology. See, the word hell comes from the Old English word Hel, the name of a Norse goddess who ruled over the dead. But that Norse concept was nothing like Sheol, Hades, or Gehenna. It was a place of punishment and torture. So the King James translators took a pagan concept of punishment and used it to translate Hebrew and Greek words that simply meant the grave or the world of the dead. But why did they do that? Because by 1611, the church had already been influenced by centuries of medieval theology. Dante's Inferno had planted vivid pictures of eternal torment. Medieval paintings showed demons and lakes of fire. But none of this came from the Bible. It came from human imagination, literature, and art. But it was powerful because fear is a powerful motivator. And hell became the ultimate threat. Believe what we tell you or you're going to burn forever. Give us your money or you're going to burn forever. Obey our rules or you're going to burn forever. Fear became the foundation instead of love. But here's what's so tragic about this. The gospel, it means good news. So how is eternal torture for billions of people good news? Well, it's not. It's the worst possible news. And that right there is why so many people have walked away from Christianity and continue to walk away. Not because they hate God, but because they can't worship a God who would torture people forever. And you know what? They're right to walk away from that version of God, because that's not the God of the Bible. That's a God created by mistranslation, medieval imagination, and human control. The real God, the God revealed in Scripture, is the God that said that burning people never even entered his heart. Now let me tell you how discovering this changed my life. See, for years I lived with constant anxiety, not just about my own salvation, but about everyone that I loved and cared about. I mean, I would lay awake at night worried about my friends who didn't believe, family members who had walked away from church. I couldn't enjoy God's love for me because I was terrified about God's wrath towards them. But when I discovered the truth of these words, when I realized that hell was never real, well, everything changed. I stopped trying to save everyone and just started loving them. I stopped seeing God as some cosmic torturer and started seeing Him as the perfect Father who treasures every single person He's ever made, including you. See, hell-based Christianity doesn't produce transformation. It produces trauma. It doesn't create compassion. It creates compliance. And it doesn't build connection. It builds control. But here's the truth, whether you believe it or not, you're safe. You're loved. You're already included. Not because you believe the right things or prayed the right prayer or obeyed the right rules, but because God is love, and love doesn't torture. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't control through fear. Love pursues, love forgives, and love includes. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Okay, Steve, but what about the lake of fire? Because that's in the Bible too. That's a fair question, and next week, we're going to jump right into the lake of fire. Here's a preview. The lake of fire only appears in Revelation, a book of symbols. And what gets thrown into this fire? Well, death itself, the old world of the dead, our sins. You can't torture death, and you can't punish a place, and you can't burn sins. This is symbolic of what God promised. He said, as far as the east is from the west, that's how far He's going to remove our transgressions from us. See, the lake of fire actually represents God's forgiveness, the complete destruction of everything that separated us from Him. He didn't destroy us. He destroyed what was against us. So next week, the lake of fire, how God destroyed sin forever. You don't want to miss it. Look, hell was never real, but the fear of it shaped millions of lives. For centuries, people have cried themselves to sleep, worried about their loved ones burning forever. For centuries, the gospel, which means good news, has been turned into the worst possible news. But today, that ends for you. You don't have to live afraid anymore. You don't have to worry about whether you're doing enough, believing enough, or obeying enough. You don't have to lose sleep over people that you love, because the God who said that burning people never entered His heart is the same God that loves you unconditionally. Judgment isn't coming. It's over. And love won. And your place in that love is secure. Not because you earned it, but because that's who God is. He's love, and love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't torture. Love doesn't exclude. Love includes. Love forgives, and love treasures. And you, my friend, you are treasured. So let me ask you, what would change in your life if you truly believed you were treasured unconditionally? How would you treat others differently if you knew they were treasured too? See, hell was a lie built on mistranslations, medieval imagination, and human control. But God's love for you, now that's the truth. And when you really believe the truth, you become free to treasure others, and that changes everything. The truth will set you free, and my friend, you are free.